Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Better Than Rich Show. I'm your host, Andrew Biggs, and I'm here with my co-host, Mike Abramowitz. Mike, how are we doing this morning?
Good morning. Happy Friday. Here we go.
Yeah, dude, I'm excited. We got a great topic for today. Today, we're going to talk all about how to focus on your own lane, stay in your own lane, and not get distracted by what others are up to. By the way, I already got a comment that we have some spell check errors in our comments there. I'm sure we'll get that corrected in the post, as they say. But welcome this morning. I see we got a few viewers. If you're here live with us, let us know where you're chiming in from and say what up. Also, one of the easiest ways you can help us is simply by liking this or dropping a comment, or of course sharing this on your timeline. If you don't mind doing that, that helps us out a ton. It helps us get to a wider audience. So welcome, everyone. Glad you're tuning in. And today we're going to talk all about running your own race and how to kind of put the blinders on in your life. Because what I've noticed in working with a lot of people is that they get kind of jealous, or they get envious, or they're constantly feeling that they're behind other people. Even though a lot of times, most of the people I'm working with are top 1%, top 5%, top 10% sort of producers, they still feel like they're behind because they don't have exactly what they want, or they don't have what that person has. And they're always feeling that way. And I don't think it's the best way to do business. You're somebody who I think has learned this really, really well. So I'm excited to break it down with you. But to start off, I mean, how would you describe this problem, at a macro level? What do you see out there in the world and with the people you work with, Mike?
Well, I mean, we're raised in an environment that it's like you got to be the best. A lot of people get sucked up into the sales reports, or how they rank, or the recognition. And there's an old saying in our business. It's like you can buy the CPO, or you could buy the business by adding more recruits, or adding more good people, or throwing out really awesome contests. But the fact is you could buy the business, but it's not going to be healthy for profitability, and all you're doing is satisfying the ego. John Maxwell said it best: if you're comparing yourself or your business to other people or other businesses, there's only one of two emotions you're going to feel. You're either going to feel inadequate if you're behind, or you're going to feel complacent if you're ahead. There's never going to be an emotion that's actually going to serve you if you are comparing yourself to other people. So the best person to compare yourself to is who you were yesterday. Who were you before? What were you capable of doing? What was your business capable of doing before? And what could we do better? How could we improve? How could we evolve? And that's really it. And invest and double down into that, because that's what's actually going to create the right emotion that's not egoic. It's actually going to be more self-serving, and also more serving to the people in your organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love what you said there, inadequate or complacent. If you're feeling like you're in one of those two places right now, either you're comparing yourself to someone who's beyond you right now, who you shouldn't be comparing yourself to if you're feeling inadequate, or if you're feeling complacent, you're comparing yourself to people below you or behind you that you shouldn't be comparing yourself to. And a lot of times we're just comparing ourselves to just kind of proximity, right? I was such and such in the region, or I was such and such in the division, or I was, compared to who these people are in my class, in my category. And it's like, that's kind of irrelevant. We can't really even control a lot of times what our competition is up to. And, instead of being competition focused, what if you just got hyper focused on you and your business? And instead of every single time the sales report comes out, or every single time, an update comes out on the website, you're not clicking refresh, because you're not worried about it. If you're number 1, or you're number 10, or you're number 20, or you're not even on the report, it's okay, right? Especially in the short term. Here's a paradigm shift for you all that I want to invite you to. Instead of comparing yourself to others, compare yourself against your own projections. So I'll say that again. Instead of comparing yourself to others, compare yourself against your own projections. So I don't really care if I'm number 1, or I'm number 10, or I'm number 20, or I'm number 157. It doesn't matter to me. What I care about is I have a set of projections set up in my business of what we're going to do week over week, what we're going to do month over month, right? What we're going to do year over year. And if we're hitting those numbers, I'm going to feel pretty good. If we're behind, I'm going to be like, okay, why are we behind? And I'm going to maybe feel a little bit, irked about that. And I'm going to try to find a solution to fix it. If we're blowing it out of the water, then I'm going to feel great. So I want to measure myself against my projections. And I think that that's, honestly where we need to get to. Sometimes I work with people who actually far exceed their manager's expectations for themselves. So, I'm thinking of a particular client right now who just blew up this year, and she just did incredible things. No one was really expecting it. It was kind of out of nowhere. And I remember having to be like, hey, I know everyone's praising you right now, but based on what your business looks like right now, and then you have 100 people on your team, you have this massive staff. If you don't sell 100,000 this week, you failed. And I remember having these conversations where it's like, well, what do you mean? I mean, by every other measure and every other standard, if I sold 50,000 or 70,000, it's a good week and people would still be praising me. I said, well, not compared to our projections anymore. We have updated projections and we need to start measuring that against it. Now, of course, that's kind of a harsh thing to say. I was using challenge in that moment. I was still praise her. She got 75K or whatever. But I really, want us to start comparing ourselves to our projections. I'm curious what you think of that, Mike.
Yeah. One of the questions that I have to just give it back to you and we could jam on it a little bit is, how can someone adequately create those projections for themselves? How do they know what is attainable or, realistic or, within reach? And I know you've worked through some workshops with me that we could bring up, but I'm curious if you have something specific that shows up for you.
Yeah, this is a good question in general. How to create, realistic projections, and how to create sets of projections. So one of the things I always subscribe to is, different paths, different trajectories. So I want to kind of have a path for a worst case scenario. I also want to have a path for a best case scenario, and then I want a path for what's most likely to happen. So again, worst case scenario, best case scenario, what's most likely to happen. And the reason I want these three sets of projections on all of my KPIs is because, generally speaking, things are going to fall into one of those categories. Usually it's going to be in the middle, right? But every once in a while, things are going to fall short. And every once in a while, you're going to vastly exceed expectations, like the situation I was just speaking to. So when you're putting these projections together, I call it a must do, could do, should do. So it's like, okay, must do is what we have to do to kind of stay on pace or to even just be profitable might be your must do number. But it's kind of like a bare minimum that you'd be willing to accept in a week or a month or a year. So that's like your must do number. Then your should do number is kind of like, okay, if we're acting kind of conservatively and some things go well and some things don't, what's most likely to happen here? And then best case scenario is if everything breaks right. So it's pretty simple, but I kind of want to break down that by every single KPI. Like, okay, if we're able to get this many leads and then we're able to get this many calls and we're able to get this many, interviews or this many phone calls or this many sales are happening, and this is the average order, then we can kind of map that out. And so you can kind of create these almost like a projection matrix, right? Of things going well in different categories, and it spits out a number. And, sometimes those are vastly different numbers than at the high end and the low end, but that's to be expected. Does that answer the question, Mike, or what do you think?
Yeah. That definitely does. And one thing that I know you did with me, I specifically remember 2017, we came off of a pretty rough May. And when I say rough, we did 45,000 for the month of May in 2017, something like that. And put that in perspective, this year in May, 245,000 or something like that. So to put it, just to kind of give you a framework. So it wasn't very good. And that next month in June, we did 200 grand. And because at the end of May, you asked me a series of questions and you said, in 30 days from now, forget about the journal, forget about writing, just what would you want everything to look like? Well, if everything worked out perfectly, what would it look like? Describe it to me. How would it feel? What are your numbers? What else do you want? How many recruits? How many clients? How many reps? What does a team night feel like? What is the meeting feel like? What is the what does your schedule feel like when you look at your day-to-day activities? And I specifically remember this, and I just kind of rapid fire and just spat a bunch of things. We want this many people at team night. We want to go to Applebee's and like crew of people, and we're gonna we're gonna do 50K for the push, just 2 weeks. What we did for the month of May we're gonna do in 2 weeks, and just rattling it off, all the things that we wanted. And then it happened. So in order to create those KPIs of what
Sure.
you said, Andrew, of the must do, should do, could do, um I think the almost like the prerequisite before doing that is really getting clear of what you want, what would excite you, what juices you up. So if you're listening right now, maybe take a moment after and just like reach for the pen, or just like voice memo yourself and just like
Hmm.
jam on that for a little bit. Like, what are all the things I want? Like, what do I want 30 days from now? Some people set New Year's resolutions. 1 year is way too long. Like 30 days. What do I want? And just jam on it for a little bit, see what comes up. And then once you clear on some of those things that bring a smile to your face, say, damn, 30 days from now, that would fire me up. Then go into, okay, what are the musts, what are the shoulds, what are the coulds on all of this, that I could still feel the way I feel about these goals. It's also going to move me closer and closer towards the annual projections and goals that we have for ourselves. And we did that again at the end of June and then at the end of July. And I've now been doing it every
Hmm.
month and campaign and year since. And what's kind of cool is my current problems were once my goals. And I think
Hmm.
that's a lot of fun to think about as you get really good at running your own race.
Absolutely. It's one of those things that is sometimes so ingrained into what I do that I forget that it's an important step. So I appreciate it. Basically, what you're talking about here is vision casting, right? Which is really actually going there before we get into the numbers, right? Because sometimes people want to break down numbers before we really even have like a sense of what we want. We just kind of want to go off of a number that feels good or sounds good or looks good on paper or whatever, but we're not really attuned to what we want and what we want it to feel like. How many people are on the team? What sort of growth is happening inside these individuals? What's the culture like? So asking questions like that, so you can start with the end in mind. I really like the 30 days idea. I also do think coming into a new year, it wouldn't be a bad idea to start thinking about these things. A question I've asked people recently is, hey, on December 31st, 2021, I know sometimes like with what's happening in the world, you might not be willing to think past a few days given what's going on right now, but see what you can do, because guess what? The world's not going to stop no matter who gets elected. So focus on your business, run your own race, focus on what you can control. Imagine it's December 31st, 2021, and you're raising a toast to the year that was. What's taken place in the last 14 months that's radically changed your life, that's radically changed the business? What does that look like? What does it feel like? Who else is there? How much have you sold? How much money have you made? Where have you traveled to? What's your relationship with your wife or husband like? What's your relationship to your health and fitness like? What milestones or accomplishments have occurred in the last 14 months, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So going there first then says, okay, well, for that to be the case, here's what my projections need to look like. And we can pull out a spreadsheet and get nerdy about it. But I really like the idea of going big picture first and then getting nerdy. So what do you think of this, Mike?
Yeah, and documenting it is really critical too, because every month I have a little meeting with myself, and then every
Hmm.
day I have a little meeting with myself. So when I say document it, is I just look at how I'm pacing towards those areas of my life that I deemed important. So for me, let me just do like my incantation that I say to myself is, and I'll say, I, Mike Abramowitz, see, hear, feel, and know that I am fun, I am influence, I am love, I am faith, I am courage, and I am free. And the purpose of my life is to educate, inspire, and be a force for good for myself and others. Yes. My 2020 vision will be about living my best life, being on purpose, grow in love, and sustainable, simple business systems. That's my incantation. I say that to myself. And then on my next part of my spreadsheet, I have all of my so then I'll incant that and I'll read that, my affirmations. And then on my other side of my spreadsheet, I have my everyday goals, my 30-day goals. Then I have my annual goals, and then there's the 3-year and then a 5-year. So it's like in order on a spreadsheet. And then I just have that little quick meeting with myself of like, all right, how am I pacing towards some of these? And what's crazy is I did this, I guess, 2 years ago. And so I still have my 5 year. So I'm 3 years away from my 5 years. And what's kind of cool is some of them I'm almost at already. Some of them I'm not even close to. But just by looking at them, I'm going to reassess. And every year I'll sit down with myself and reassess. So I'm going to reassess again this year, like Andrew just said, but I'm checking in every day. And at the end of the month, like we just finished up October. So in November, it's like, all right, what are the goals that I want to achieve this in the month of November that are aligned with identifying myself, my purpose, my wife, which is grow in love, and then my business. And I obviously have my outcomes for the year as well, which I originally set, which is, a certain amount of income, which is a certain amount of development for my business, certain health goals that I have. And I look at those and then I have it quantified and broken down. So one of the goals, for example, was 50 push-ups for the year. And I wasn't able to do 5. So going from less than 5 to 50 was like, all right, I have to have incremental numbers. So at the end of this month, my previous max out I did a few months ago. I don't like to max out on the push-ups because it actually is not like the best for the body, but it just gives me a gauge. It was like 30, 35, 36. And I want to get to 40 by the end of this month where I could do 40 in a row. And I'll max out at that at the end of this month. So that way, at the end of December, I can attempt to do that max out and see if I'm able to hit or how close I am to that 50 mark. And it's the same thing with money. It's been the same thing with other goals that I have on my spreadsheet.
It's beautiful.
But it's running my race.
This is awesome. I mean, that's such a great example for everyone listening and watching right now of Mike every single morning setting his intention, knowing what his vision is, knowing what his goals are, setting his focus. I mean, so much right there for you guys to unpack. And if you just do what Mike just showed you to do, you're going to be very, very successful in life. And there's no surprise why Mike is where he's at because of that. Some things that came up for me there, like, let's just continue this analogy. Like, okay, 50 push-ups by the end of the year. Now, what I see a lot of people do is they'll say, you know what, like, I can only do 5. So-and-so is like ripped and they're so amazing. And they'll never be that good. And they're, basically like the fact that they're comparing themselves to somebody who's further along and they shouldn't be comparing themselves to basically cripples them. And then they don't change at all, right? They say, okay, I'm not going to do anything. Instead of putting together an incremental plan, right, to get to 50, they'll say, oh, well, so-and-so can already do 100. Like, why is it such a big deal for me to do 50? Because, it's, what is it? 1,000% growth on 5, right? It's like, that's why. Do you want 1,000% growth, or are you measuring it in raw numbers? We need to be willing to measure ourselves against our goals, measure ourselves against our projections, and kind of keep the blinders on and not worry about it. And I see so many people, I mean, we're using a health example. I think it's even more, prescient in business and in income.
And the business one was $2 million district team and 30 development candidates. So that was my business one that I put on in the beginning of the year. And I'm proud to say that we are over 2 million in business and we have over 30 development candidates, but that was the number that I created last year for this year. And by the way, that was the number that was on there 2 years ago. So 50 push-ups and the $2 million district team with 30 development candidates has been on there for 2 years, but this is the first year that we're actually making good progress to it. So,
right. And to the opposite side of the spectrum, right? So we gave an example of where you'd feel inadequate, but on the opposite side, on the business side, you'd feel complacent if you just said, I want to be number one, right? Because, you probably wouldn't have to hit 2 million to be number one. And so, you're number one, but more importantly, you're hitting your numbers, right? That you set out to hit. And, I just see all these, people who they want to get rich quick, right? Like I was talking to someone the other day. I was like, hey, have you noticed like you kind of want to get rich quick? And they're like, yeah, of course I want to get rich quick. Like that, like what kind of dumb question is that, Andrew? And I said, yeah, it's a good thing. Like, it'd be awesome if we could all get rich quick, but it's also like a recipe for failure because, people who want to get rich quick, they burn out. They always feel like they're behind. They oftentimes get frustrated when they're not getting rich quick, which very rarely happens. They're comparing themselves to people who they don't know at all, who they don't know where they got their money from. They don't know, if it's even real or if they're just in a bunch of debt. They are subject to get scammed, right? Or to jump into something and take too much risk and then get screwed. It's like, okay, yeah, okay, if I give you $25,000, you'll give me $100,000 in 3 months. Awesome. And then come to find out that you're getting $10,000 back instead of $100,000 back. And they say, oh, well, it just didn't work out this time. Sorry. And it's almost like gambling instead of running a healthy business. So I said, hey, what if we decided to get rich slowly? And then they kind of laughed and they were like, hey, like this doesn't sound sexy. This doesn't sound fun. I'm like, yeah, but like, so what? Like, is it such a bad thing? This person like really likes nice cars. And I was like, is it such a bad thing if you got your Lamborghini at 35 instead of 26, And he's like, well, no, I guess not. I'm like, yeah, like what if you just took one step at a time and, and I said, how many people do you know who have Lamborghinis? He said, I don't know. Like he said, in real life? right. I was like, yes, in real life, not on the internet. 2. Okay, cool. Like, awesome. I know 1, right? It's like, fair enough. Like, if you have 1 at all, then you're obviously a top 1% producer. The whole point is, though, you don't need 1 to be a top 1% producer. You don't need 1 to be successful in life. Can you just stop comparing yourself to people on Instagram? So, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, what happens is then it can trigger desperation because then we start making decisions from that place of scarcity of like, oh my gosh, I really want to get rich quick. I see an opportunity where it's really not an opportunity. It's a gamble, like you said, but we frame it as an opportunity because we're desperate, because we're scarce. We're coming from that place of craving abundance where we are really just chasing after something that might not be real. So we negotiate with our own integrity sometimes to try to make it. And we are the best salespeople to ourselves. Like we could convince ourselves of anything. It's like, no, this is a really good deal, and we can justify anything. So justification starts settling in where, great, you can actually go get a Lamborghini right now. That's fine. Like you go steal it. There's consequences, ramifications to it. So we don't want to get so desperate to the point where we're willing to compromise integrity or compromise, truth. So that's the first thing that kind of showed up for me is and by the way, to the point of get rich slow versus get rich quick, I think it's underneath our umbrella of better than rich. It's like, what about just enjoying the process and really enjoying the process of growth on your journey of becoming who you are destined to become. I just listened to Matthew McConaughey twice on Lewis Howes' podcast. I mean, this conversation, I bought his book, Green Lights. I can't wait to freaking read it. And one of the things that he talked about on the podcast interview, he said he's 50, and Lewis asked him, what would your 60-year-old self be saying to your 50-year-old self now? And he said, no one's ever asked me that question. Let's have the conversation. And on the interview, he starts having a conversation with himself, 60-year-old Matthew versus 50-year-old Matthew. And I can't spit it to you verbatim right now, but I can know how I felt listening to that. I felt like if I can get to that point in my life where I'm 60 years old or I'm 50 years old and I'm getting that type of wisdom for myself and that type of validation for myself, I don't really care what life is like if I could feel the feelings that he is feeling in that moment, or that type of wisdom that he has in that moment. It was really profound and beautiful.
Mm,
And he just so happened to be really rich, but I think it's bigger than that. It's better than that.
right. Well, I think most people who are really rich in life, not just rich in their income, but rich in a number of different ways, fulfillment, impact, relationships, satisfaction, happiness, etc. Um, they're like that, right? And they actually are more interested in wisdom than their money. And that's certainly a big part of what we attempt to do, is to impart wisdom to you all, so that, no matter what your bank account looks like, you feel rich and you're better
And
than
that's
rich.
partially why they make so much money.
Exactly. And it's almost like a chicken and egg problem, right? Most people think, okay, I'll be happy when I have a bunch of money. It's kind of the opposite. You have a bunch of money once you're happy. And
And
we really need to be willing to really understand that and take it all the way to its logical conclusion. What were you going to say?
and not that this is the Matthew McConaughey show, but I do have a man crush on him now. So one of the
I was
things that
going to
was
say,
really
he's
beautiful.
50 years old. He's looking pretty good for a 50, man.
Here's the
Good looking
thing. One
dude.
of the cool things that he talked about in the interview was he was the rom-com guy. He's like, Hugh Grant
Nice.
passed me the baton and I ran with it. And he was the rom-com guy. And he said, I'm losing depth of myself and my soul doing these rom-coms, but they were paying me lots of money. So I could, he's like, I'm being shirtless on the beach in these movies so I can be in my mansion shirtless on my beach and my home. And he said at one point, he's just like, I got to step away from it. He said, I don't know how long I'm going to step away from it for, but I'm done with it. And he said 8 months went by, 10 months went by, 12 months went by, nothing. And then he said he finally, at about 15, 16, 17 months, a deal came in for $8 million to do another rom-com. And he said, 8 million, oof.
Mm.
And he read it and he said, no. They give him 10 million. He said, no. 12 million. He said, let me read it again. No. $15 million. He turned away $15 million. Said, I'm done with rom-coms. I need something more fulfilling in my life. And he actually had a conversation with himself. He's like, even if I go back and coach high school football and give up the fame, I will live a fulfilling life. I'm just done with the emptiness that I feel and not depth. And then he said 20 months. It took 20 months, but then all of a sudden the universe brought him more drama films. And that's where, he said, he obviously got the Academy Award for the one movie, the Dallas Buyers Club,
Right.
and some of these dramas that came his way, and it was just beautiful to see when you can get that much clarity, that much understanding of what is important to you, and to not just the surface level, not just the Lamborghini, but to like your core, to your soul, to what you're meant for, and you're willing to say yes to certain things and no to other things. Wow, it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. And he's married, he has 3 kids, and it was a great conversation. I highly recommend listening to it. But the lesson that I draw from just that segment specifically is, with what we represent at Better Than Rich is not necessarily, not only not comparing yourself to others on your race, but knowing that there's not necessarily this finish line on your race either. Just enjoy the process.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoy the process every day. Wake up, feel good. And if you're not feeling good, do what you can to help yourself, position yourself to feel good. And as Matthew McConaughey might say, get those green lights, earn those Saturdays, like position yourself to feel good tomorrow. If you don't necessarily feel good today, then do whatever you can to make sure you feel good tomorrow, and earn some of those green lights for your future self. Earn those Saturdays for your future self.
Love that, man. I love it. I'll have to check it out. Maybe you can drop the link in the chat.
Yeah, I'll definitely drop the link
here. I think that'd be awesome. So, one of the things I also thought about, when we're thinking about running your own race, is also just being willing to celebrate other successes, right? And be willing to, be happy for somebody when they're doing well. I think it was Jordan Peterson who gave this definition that I really liked, which is like, how do you know if someone's really your friend? It's like you can share good news with them and they're genuinely happy for you. And it's like so many times when, I can kind of watch, to see who's really celebrating people's successes and who's not, right? Who's kind of got that little envy and that jealousy. It's like, there's a reason why these ideas of envy and jealousy and go way, way back, right? Into the to the myths of our society and are built into the structure of, they're all over. These are themes in the Bible, and they're themes in many religious traditions. So it's because it's a human struggle, right? We want what we can't have. We want more. We struggle. There's a thing in Buddhism that's called the realm of the hungry ghosts, and it's like the imagery is these ghosts that have like these huge mouths and these huge stomachs, and they just can't stop consuming. And it's like very much it's kind of theorized that this is kind of the age of the realm of the hungry ghosts, and we're like all living this like consumption lifestyle. We have to consume more and more and more and be better, and always compare ourselves to Mr. and Mrs. Jones across the street. And if we can just stop and just celebrate other people's successes, so that when Mrs. Jones comes back with her brand new car and it's super nice, and you're kind of instead of getting jealous inside, like really celebrate, like, this is an awesome car, let's go for a ride, like, this is awesome, congratulations, and it doesn't become a competition. Same thing with your friends inside your business, or people who are maybe competing with you in your category or anything like that. If someone's kicking your butt, give them a call, celebrate, say, hey, congratulations, like, hey, I'm super proud of you, super happy for you. By the way, like, hey, can I learn anything from you? Like, I wonder what you're up to. How are you getting these results? Instead of saying, screw that person, I don't like them, they suck, let's tear them down, let's throw shade at them or whatever. So any thoughts on this in terms of like celebrating other people's successes, or like being a good sport and practicing good sportsmanship? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, a couple things show up. The first is I like to double down on those relationships with those people. I think that if someone is someone is performing at a higher level than me, then I want to double down on those relationships. I want to give them a gift using John Ruhlin's giftology, sending them a thank you note, just fostering the relationship in some sort, just so they know, like, I appreciate what you're doing, because by you doing what you're doing, you're indirectly challenging me to level up as a man, as a business owner, as a leader. So thank you. I appreciate it. And if you're willing and open, I would love to pick your brain and see if you'd be willing to share. So it's like, I would want to engage with those people, and I have engaged with those people. And that way I can work my way up. But you got to be a good student. You got to be willing to be a good student if you're going to do that. As far as under the umbrella of like being a good sport, I mean, here's one of the things that I was really looking for in even the political race, and I know a lot of that's the hot topic right now, but it's unfortunate that maybe it couldn't happen the way, like, in my beautiful mind of picturesque, sunshines and rainbows, because I feel like maybe the media would have spun it as weakness or whatever. But I would have loved to see the candidates, Biden, Trump, Kamala, Pence, it doesn't matter. Like, if they just would have agreed on something, or acknowledged the other person for saying, you know what, that's a good idea, or I agree with that. That would help us. That would bring value to a lot of people, like, even if there was at the end, it's like, hey, we're practicing social distancing, but hey, good debate, hey, solid work, like something that could have the 15-year-old kid that's watching say, wow, even though they're at each other's throats for most of the game, they're able to still acknowledge each other as human beings. I think about The Last Dance. Michael Jordan was talking about how he couldn't live with the disgrace of the Detroit Pistons led by Isaiah Thomas, where they lost the game and they just walked off the court, and no handshakes, nothing. And Isaiah Thomas was like, that's what we did. Street ball, just walk off, whatever, And it's just like, we just go back into our locker room and just tail between our legs, we lost, whatever. And Jordan, a person of integrity who I followed for a better part of my life, is just like, no, you shake the other person's hand. You acknowledge them. You say, hey, that was good competition. We had a good match, but we're still human to human, integrity, and we have integrity with each other. I think that's just so critical for all the fans that are watching, all the 15-year-old Mike Abramowitzes that are watching this, to say, hey, wow, regardless of the game or the match, they could still be humans. They could still have a level of integrity with each other. And
Mm,
that's something that shows up for me. So I think that's really
yeah.
critical. And that was what you, I don't know if there's anything to piggyback on that.
Yeah, I mean, I really love that that idea. And when I was growing up, I just remember just being taught these lessons. Right? It's like in sports, in any sort of competition. I was in everything. Sports, music, all sorts of competitions throughout my life. There was always a focus on being a good sport, right? And practicing good sportsmanship. And it seems to be a dying art in some ways, right? Where it's like after the tennis match or whatever, shake the guy's hand and say good match, whether we won or lost. Um, Same thing in everything in life. We need to be a good sport, and it's like these examples are dwindling. And for those of us in positions of any sort of influence or any sort of power, any sort of platform, it's our job to kind of embody what it means to be a good sport, and show people what that looks like. So I really love that analogy. I wanted to circle back on something you said that I want to just highlight was you double down on relationships where there's a healthy competition, right? That if somebody is challenging you and is competing with you, you actually reach out to them and invest in those relationships, and you want to become, close to them and kind of add them to your circle of influence rather than keeping them on the outside. And I think that that's a really, really important topic
Yeah,
to
because
make sure we highlight.
competition rooted from Latin, conspire with.
Mm,
Competition isn't you win, I lose. That's not a zero sum. Competition is conspire with, is as you get better, we get better, right?
mhm,
As I get better, we get better. It's like conspire with, we're doing this together. We're in this together. It's not a zero sum type of situation like many people might think because of a scoreboard.
mhm,
No, that scoreboard is just a reflection of who won that match. But the fact
mhm,
is the team who didn't necessarily win on the scoreboard, well, maybe they got better by playing in that game. So it's not necessarily zero sum. They got better. They learned different plays. They learned some different strategies to get improvement for the future, which means they made progress, which I would say is a win,
mhm,
which is what competition brings.
mhm. Totally. And it's this rising tide raises all ships sort of mentality, especially with people in your industry, people in your space, people in your business, kind of, yes, having a healthy rivalry, but kind of coming together and sharing best practices, learning from each other. So often you're not even in direct competition, right? For the same sort of business. I take your business, for example, Mike, it's like, you're not in competition with somebody in California, right? Because you guys have territories. And so it's like, it's not like, they're taking your business away. It's not a zero sum game. You help them, they help you. And everybody learns from each other. I also just look at this from a meta perspective, which is another kind of better than rich principle. It's like, well, let's just use the basketball example. If the Bulls beat the Pistons, the Bulls won, the Pistons lost, right? But, you know, they're actually on the same team, and the same team is the NBA and the sport as a whole. And if they put out a great product and have viewers, who really enjoy the product, then everybody's winning, right? Because the TV deals are worth more and the salaries are worth more, and everybody wins as a result of them playing a really, really great game. So they're actually on the same team, which is the National Basketball Association, right? And they're competing against the NFL and the MLB and these different sports, right? And then if you say, okay, well, what's the category that all of those are under? Well, sports. What's sports competing with? Sports is competing with sitcoms, and it's competing with nightly news. It's competing with other things. So it's like when we look at certain umbrellas, we're looking at the Pistons and the Bulls, right? And even inside certain teams, it's like, well, the starting point guard position, right? Or whatever. There's all these little competitions stacked on bigger competitions. And I'd much rather focus on the bigger competitions than the small ones. So that's a way I like to look at it. Any other thoughts on this? And then we can start heading for the exits today. But running your own race, anything else coming up for you that you think is important or prescient that people should be paying attention to improve this in their lives?
I think we hit on a lot of really great topics today, from conspire with to compare yourself to either what you've done in the past or the future projections that you have for yourself. Be a good sport and double down on relationships of people that you want to be like or want to surround yourself with. And I love John Ruhlin's principle of giftology. I mean, it's so valuable to invest in some of those relationships. And what's interesting is there's I've been on the receiving end of that, but I've also been on the giving end of that more so than the receiving end. And it's so important to offer value to those relationships. And you might say, well, how do I offer value to someone who's better than me? It's like, how do I offer value to them? I'll give a Cliff Notes example to this. Is I was in Austin, Texas, and I was at a retreat, and there were some really powerful people that I've looked up to in the industry for quite some time, playing volleyball at 7 a.m. And so I woke up. The retreat started like 8:30. I woke up at 5:30 to drive out to where they were playing volleyball. I wanted to make sure I was one of the first people there so I could network with some people. And then two people came. I didn't know who they were. They were stretching. So I just walked up to them and started stretching with them and struck up conversation. And then more people came. I helped them put up the net. Someone wanted to, two started bump setting and spiking. There was a third person that was kind of out. So I was like, hey, you want to do this? Yeah. So bump set and spike. And it turns out like some of these individuals that I was bump set and spiking with are CEOs of these companies, in Keller Williams and real estate and investment groups and all this. And one of the gentlemen, how was I able to offer a relationship? I gave a gratitude note. We took a photo together. I offered humor. I offered curiosity. I just told them how inspiring everything that they're doing is to people like me and all of the people that follow them. Asked thought-provoking questions. And then because of that, I now got invited to an email list of certain topics that are being sent out, one of which was an investment opportunity. And because of that investment opportunity, I'm going to be investing in it and putting my money to work with one of the gentlemen inside this group. And it started because I not only made the decision to go join and be a part of this, but I also made the decision to show up and try to serve as much as possible. Even though I had nothing, what do you offer a bunch of really great people? I offered curiosity, offered compassion, I offered acknowledgement. I gave compliments, genuine compliments with backing and reasoning behind it. Offered humor. It offered, that's really all I can offer. I offered another caring heart to their lives, and because of that, some people took to it. And who knows where the relationships will go, but it's kind of nice to know that even if we feel like we don't have much to offer people, there's always something that we could offer somebody. And if we can get more in tune with ourselves and our truth and why I'm on this earth and what race am I actually running, when we do encounter someone who might be a level or 2 or 3 levels above us, we're not going to feel inadequate going into that environment. Although there was a little piece of me that may have felt a little inadequate, but then I put on my game face and I said, no, I'm worthy of this. Let's go. And I was able to receive it fully, and I'm still receiving it fully, which is really exciting. So
it's a great story and a great example of how to do this, guys. For everyone listening, just being willing to put yourself in proximity to those individuals and not feel inadequate, to not feel like, these people probably don't want me around, or I'm going to bother them, or whatever the story is normally when these sorts of things happen for you. So this has been fun, Mike. It's a pleasure as always. Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you have any questions or anything, you can drop them in the comments and we'll come back and answer them. This has been fun. Thanks everyone for joining us again. And remember to leave today better than you found it. Thanks. Bye.